Corporate finance practice problem using OneNote. Dissident stockholder group cumulative voting multiple scenarios. Get ready, it's time to take your chance with corporate finance. Here we are in OneNote. If you have access to OneNote, would like to follow along, you're not required to, but if would like to, we're in the icon on the left-hand side, Practice Problems tab, then down in the 1718 Dissident Stockholder Group Cumulative Voting Multiple Scenarios tab. Also note, when using OneNote, look at the Immersive Reader tool. Our practice problems will be down in the text area as well. Same name, same number, but with transcripts. Transcripts that can be translated into multiple different languages and either listened to or read in them. Closing the icon, information up top. We're going to go through the calculation, then down below. We're looking at a cumulative voting scenario, but this time a bit more complex of a scenario. We're going to imagine it from two different perspectives of the voting scenario and have this kind of unknown position, which would probably be the case in most type of situations. So if you want a more simplified example to start off on what cumulative voting is, take a look at the cumulative voting practice problem 1, and then you can go into here, which will be a little bit more complex type of scenario. The general overview, we're imagining ourselves to be the voters, the owners of the corporations. We have influence over the corporations by electing the board of directors, who then can hire the management for the corporation, the board of directors then acting as the agents of the owners, the voters. So now we're thinking about how many people on the board could possibly we be putting on the board if we're using the cumulative voting structure as opposed to straight or standard voting. In other words, we're not going to be voting for each person or each position individually, because if we were, that would typically be rewarding. The majority would basically win. If you had 51 shares, then you would win every one. We have this cumulative structure that we'll be using here, which typically will be beneficial to a minority position, but we can use a similar calculation whether we're in the minority or the majority. So the scenario here, we have the every existing board member is happy with the company president. So we can kind of imagine this from the management perspective, top management, the president, the CEO, and so on, the top management of the company. And you're thinking, what kind of worries does the top management of the company have? Well, of course, the people hiring them are the board of directors, and the board of directors is put into place by the owners in the form of votes from the shareholders. So if there's a change or the board of directors becomes unhappy, then, of course, the top management will be concerned. So we're going to imagine a situation where the president, the current board members, which we'll imagine 13 board members, are all happy with the president's performance, but possibly we have a dissident group of investors that we're imagining here that would like to vote for new board of directors that would have possibly the objective of adjusting management, looking for better returns. Hopefully they think they maybe could have management that could represent their interests better, possibly getting better returns. So we imagine the starting point. The president has the board of directors currently on the board 13. All the seats we're going to imagine are up for re-election. They are all happy with the current status quo. The dissident stockholder group controls proxies for shares. Now, proxies basically just means that they have the ability to kind of act as an agent in the act of voting. So they're going to be able to control then the votes and be able to direct them the way they want to direct them for, they're saying, the 45,000 shares. This dissident group then is looking to get a controlling part of the board of directors, which would be 7, right? We would need 7 so that if you were to vote on management decision making, you'd have a majority on the board of directors, 7 out of the 13. So you would think then if these dissident group was able to get a hold of 7 replacement members that are willing to then adjust management, that the president's job would be in jeopardy there and they might be a replacement of the management at that point. So then the current president and associates currently on the board hold proxies for shares of 65,000. So I will call these the incumbent group. The current president and the board members that are currently happy with the current scenario hold 65,000 shares. But then there's this whose position is not known, so we don't know where they're going to lie at the 37,000, and the total outstanding shares are 147,000. So quick recap, you can think about this from both perspectives, right? So we're going to look at it from the perspective of the dissidents, the people that would like to replace as many of the board of directors, hopefully to make a change in management for a board that can represent them better, possibly getting better returns. we could think about it from their perspective. From their perspective, they may not know exactly what their opponents are, but they have a pretty good idea generally who would be in that group. They might not know everybody in the group, but they probably have to then estimate this other group, which is up in the air. They don't know at all, and there's probably a substantial amount that may not vote at all. Within an election, you have to take into consideration what that might do as well. And then we have the current president and associates currently on the board. Board hold proxies. We'll take a look at it from their perspective. From their perspective, they want to hold on to at least 7 of the 13, and obviously each individual board member and whatnot has their own interests and whatnot. But from a collective standpoint, they want to hold on. From the president's standpoint, right? The corporate president, he wants them to hold on to 7 out of the 13. So that they don't elect in order to replace the president and the management to make changes there. But once again, they might have an idea of the dissident stockholders of the 45, but they don't really know how much the unknown possibly would be. So let's take a look at it from both of them, their perspectives. I'll do this a little bit quicker because we have seen this problem in the past, this type of problem. So we're gonna look at it first from the standpoint of this green area, the dissidents. Where would they be? Worst case scenario, how many people could they pick up on the board, given that everybody else is going to be against them? So we're assuming this 37,000 works against them as well, even though it's an unknown. That's where we will start. So we can do this 2 different ways. I'll do this 2 different ways with these 2 different formulas. And so we'll use the first formula. We got the shares of directors desired is going to be 4.29. Now, if we were to work this in Excel, this would be basically the unknown type of component. We can use goal-seek to find it. I also do it this way just to show that these 2 formulas are related. You can basically use your algebra to plug in the unknown, basically making that X as the unknown for here. So that would be X in your formula up top. And then we have the outstanding shares would be the 147,000. We multiply that out. We get then the 629,986. We then have the denominator, which is going to be the total number of shares, or board members, 13. That's how many board seats are up for election plus 1. And then that'll give us 14. That's the denominator. Numerator divided by the denominator is 44,999. And then we simply add 1 to that, giving us then the 45,000. Now, if this was in Excel, you can kind of back into this number using the goal-seek, asking Excel to please set this last cell, 45,000, to 45,000, which we know it should be this number, by changing this number, and you can kind of back into that cell. We do that in Excel if you want to work it that way. You can also just see that you can use this formula, plugging X into this formula, and then solve for X to figure that out, or you can use the second formula, which we will do now. Let's do that same thing with the second formula. Here's the second formula. You have the shares owned minus 1. That would be the 44,999, because we have the 45,000 shares minus the 1. And then we have the directors to be elected, which is 13 plus 1. That would be 14. And we're going to multiply that out. So the 44,999 times 14 is 629,986. And then the denominator, total number of shares outstanding, 147,000. Dividing that out, we once again get to the 4.29. So that's the same 4.29 that we had above. Now, we can't elect, obviously, a partial board member, 29% of 1. So we have to drop the decimal in essence. So we're looking for that we could elect. Let's think that through and think about what might happen in our scenario to see what that would look like. So we're going to say, let's imagine we have the total votes here. The total votes would be the outstanding shares of the 147. That's the total shares outstanding. And then we have the total number of directors to be elected, which is 13. So 13, and if we multiply that out, that's going to give us the number of votes total that are out there, 1,911,000. Now, if we look at our side, we're the dissident in this case. We're trying to make change happen here. So for us, we say that we have 45,000 shares. So that's the 45,000 shares, and we multiply that times the 13 for the number of board members. That means we have 585,000 votes. The incumbent then, and when I say the incumbent, I'm not just including the 65,000, which we probably have a decent idea of as the dissident group, because we would know who they elected and whatnot. But but we probably have a decent idea, but not completely, of what this would be. But we don't know who these are at all. We're going to assume they're all against us for our starting point for the worst case scenario. That would be the 147,000 minus the 45,000 times the 15. That would give us the 1,132,000, 1,326,000. Okay, so then if we were to plug this into our scenario, we want 13 board of directors. These are the candidates that we're imagining that would be there, and we're going to be picking our candidates. We're just, for the practice problem, say the first 4 are our candidates. So we're just simply, our strategy then would be, as we've seen in the past, taking our votes, 585,000 divided by 4, and that would give us the 146,250, which we would divide evenly over our people that we want elected. Now, the other people, we're imagining none of them vote for us, which, again, we don't really know if that's going to be the case, because they have this unknown group for sure might be on our side. They might help us out. We don't know about them, but we're going to assume that they're all not going to vote for us. Obviously, the people that are currently in power, the incumbents, they're going to know who our candidates are, because we would have had most likely to nominate them. So they're certainly not going to vote for those candidates, and they're going to pick their own candidates, and so on. So they would try to beat us by possibly putting 146,251 to beat out, or they could try a tie, but they could, let's say they try to beat us out by knowing our strategy and picking as many candidates as they can that would be above that. They would have to clear 5 through 13 plus 1 in order to beat out one of our 4 to get us down to 3. But they can't do it because this last one in would have to be in the group, and it's at, if we add that up, the 1,326,000. So these all add up to the 1,326,000. They couldn't get this last one up to the point where it would beat us, and that's why we can basically, as the dissident group here, have the 4 in place. So if we add these up then, in other words, here's the total votes that would result. If we reformat those votes, then these for the incumbents would be beating us, but we'd still got our last 4 down here that are in the top 13, so we should be okay. And this last one in, the incumbents couldn't push that one out. So all of these would have had to have beat us, plus the one more, in order for them to be able to push out one of these top 4, and they couldn't do that. Okay, so now let's take a look at it from the other side. Let's say that we're from the side of the president, and we like the status quo. We think they're doing a good job here. Maybe we had a bad quarter or bad year, but it's not their fault. Keep them in place here. So we're on that side. So same kind of calculation. I'll do this more quickly here. We're going to see how many votes could they control. Clearly, they want to keep more than 7 positions here so that they don't fire the president. From the president's perspective, he's hoping that the current administration or the current members will at least keep 7. Obviously, again, there's always going to be like personal interest in there. If you're a board member, then you don't want to be taken off the board, most likely, or something like that, right? But from the president's standpoint, they want 7 people on there so the president and the current administration, the current, executive group can keep their jobs, right? So how many can they get? So we got the number of the 6.19. This again would be the unknown. We're doing the method where you would plug in X to this first formula. In Excel, we would do a goal seek format. You could check that out in Excel if you would like. Then we're going to take the outstanding shares, which are the 147,000, and we're going to then get to the 909,986 by multiplying that out. Denominator 13 plus 1, the 13 number of board seats plus 1, that gives us 14. We take the 14 and or the numerator divided by the denominator gives us the 64,999 plus 1, which is going to give us the 65,000. So if this was anything other than this number, right, we would plug in like 5 or something, ask Excel, please change this number to what it needs to be in order to get to the answer 65,000, which is given in our problem up top. And if you were working this algebraically and you knew this first formula but not the second one, you would solve that by putting X into the unknown, which is a similar kind of method there. And then if we go to the second formula, same thing, second formula, using this formula, we'll get to the same result, hopefully. That would be the shares owned minus 1. That's the 65,000 minus 1. We then have the directors to be elected plus 1, 13 plus 1. That then is going to give us the 909,986. We'll take the 909,986 and the total shares outstanding, which is the 147,000. Dividing that out, 909,986 divided by 147,000 gives us that 6.19 again. Now, once again, we can't have 19% of a board member, so we have to drop that off and we're left with 6, which doesn't quite get us there. That doesn't quite get us. They're closer, of course, to the 7 that would be needed in order for the president to be feeling good about keeping their job, right? So, and we're not there because we don't know these unknowns. So the first one, when we looked at this first group, they were at only, what did we come up to? 4, and the other are at the 6. So we obviously have, we're looking at the worst case scenario for basically both groups here, but there's some unknown leeway that we'll have to then account for with regards to the 37,000 that we don't know where that's going to go. So let's continue this. The worst case scenario then, from the incumbent position, we have the outstanding shares are going to be 147,000. We have then the total number of directors to be elected is going to be 13. So that's going to give us a total of 1,911,000 votes. So the incumbent, which is now us now, we're thinking of ourselves as the incumbent, we're at the 65,000 times 13. That gives us the 845,000. The dissident then is the 147,000 minus the 65, or 82,000. Remember, that's not, they have votes of 45,000, but we're assuming this 37 unknown is going to go against us. They're going to side with the dissidents just to basically see what the worst case scenario would be. If we multiply that times the 13, we're at then the 1,066,000. So if we look at this from the side of the incumbents, then we need to we're going to pick up 6 seats. So we'll assume these are our candidates. Now, these are, of course, are not the same candidates A through whatever as the last example, but we're just picking them as the top 5 for our example purposes. So we're going to say these are our candidates as the incumbents. Then we're going to do our strategy that we would typically do for the worst case scenario. We're going to say we have 845,000 votes divided by 6 that we think we can pick up. That's 148,33 that we're going to apply to those 6 people. And then the dissidents will, obviously, they're going to know who our candidates are because we had to elect them. They're not going to vote for our candidates. Now, some might, because we might have some of these people that are on our side. We don't know. We don't know where they stand. But obviously, the people that are trying to have change are not going to vote for our candidates or the current candidates, and they're going to pick their own, and they're going to try to beat us out by possibly having every one of these. We gave up 7 through 13 seats, but they all have to beat our candidates in order for them to basically push out one of these top 6 that we have in place here. So they could try to beat us out by 1 if they know what our strategy is. And then this last one here isn't going to be enough. So we're adding up to 1,066,000. That's the number of votes that the dissidents have. They don't have enough to kick out one of those 6. That's the idea. So if we added these up then, adding up all the votes, these would be the total votes. If we recalculate them, sorting them by the total, then once they're beating us up top, but they can't pick up these last few. They can't kick out this last one with N. That's not big enough to push out. So we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 positions for the incumbent. And when we saw this from the position of the dissidents, they're picking up 1, 2, 3, 4 positions. So that makes sense. We got 10 positions that are kind of locked down, and then we have the other 3 positions that are basically up in the air, which if the 37,000, the unknown votes, were to consolidate, they might have, that would be the factor that would help us out with the difference. So then if you're looking at these 2 main factors, then of course the question is, well, how many of these 37,000 could we pick up? Now that you can do multiple scenarios with that, and you could even use a statistical type of model to try to say, well, what if this happens, and try to factor out possibly even the probability of a particular outcome, given the fact that the 37,000 goes your way, or how much of the 37,000 goes your way, and so on and so forth. In other words, you can even do a random calculation of how much the 37,000 will go your way or not, and try to map out the likelihood that you will pick up more seats and that kind of thing. But let's do one more down here, and let's just assume that on the dissident side, they're able to pick up all 37,000. So now on the dissident side, they had 45,000, and now they're going to able to pick up the 37,000. So now they're at 82,000 controlling. If they could do that, what would happen? Same calculation down here, but now with the 82,000, it's going to come out to 7.81. So we're using this first formula again, backing into it. You'd use X up top. The outstanding shares, 147. That's going to give us 1,147,986. The total number of directors to be elected is 13 plus 1 for the denominator of 14. The 1,147,986 divided by the 14 gives us the 81,999. Adding 1 to that, we get the 82,000. Once again, if in Excel we would start off with something like a 5 here, then use GoalSeek, asking Excel to set this end number to 82,000, which we know it should be because we just calculated by changing this number up top. If you did this in a mathematically, X could be then the unknown. You can work your algebra solving then for X. So if we then go back down and do this the other way, the second formula, same calculation. We're going to take the shares owned plus 1. So we got the shares owned minus 1. 82,000 minus 1, 81,999. Directors to be elected plus 1. 13 directors plus 1 is 14. Numerator is going to be the 1,147,986. Then we have these shares outstanding, 147,000. That gives us, once again, that 7.81. Now that 81 looks like, well, that looks pretty close to like another director, but still we can't elect 81% of a director, so we have to basically say we can lock down 7 directors. But if we're on the dissident side of things, that would be good because we'd have 7 out of 13. And if we got all 7 out of 13 to elect to remove the current management, then, and if that's our goal, we're trying to make change happen. We're saying we'd like to put some people in there that we think could represent us better and run the company more efficiently, then you would typically, once they get on the board, if you got 7 out of the 13, you would have a majority vote in the board, and you would think the president's job would be very not in a good position there. He'd be gone, basically, you would think. So in any case, if we finish this out then, if we thought this through, we have the outstanding shares of the 147, and multiplying that times the 13, we have the 1,911,000 total shares again. We are the dissidents again, but now we have 82,000 because we convinced the people that were on the fence to side with us. And that's going to give us times the 13. That'll give us the 1,066,000. The incumbents then have the 147,000 minus the 82. They're only left with the 65. So the incumbents only have the 65, and we think we locked down these 37 unknowns. And then times 13, that means that they have 845,000 that they can use against us. So if we run our scenario, then what are we going to do? We're going to take our candidates as the dissidents. We're going to take our votes and simply divide them out. So we're going to say this is going to be the 1066000 divided by 7 people, 152,285. So 152,285, the 7 people, those are our people. And then the incumbents, they're going to know our position now, so they're going to try to block us, and they're going to go down here, and they can try to say, well, I think I know their strategy. They're going to try to do this. So they're going to say 152,287 and try to beat us out, but they can't really take out the last one. They can't even, and this time it actually worked out to they can't even, get to the same number here on the 13th, and they would need an N. They would need another person in order to pick it up. So you might look at this and say, because this number, in other words, was pretty close to 8, you're thinking, maybe I can work out one more. Maybe I can pick up one more to 8. But if you do that, it doesn't quite work because the spread is different. So you can check that out. You can say, well, what would happen if I try to pick up 8 and take our number of 1,066,000 divided by 8 and see if they can beat us. But it doesn't quite work because of the spread. But it's any case, if we add that up, we're going to add that up, and then if we were to recalculate this, we would once again say who's the winner. These guys are up top. Our candidates are here. This M was the incumbent candidate date. It doesn't beat us at all. So that would lead you possibly to say, maybe we can pick up one more again. But generally, you can work it out and check it out if you want to experiment with that. And I recommend doing that. Checking that out. And then once you have that down, of course, That's assuming that we pick up this 37,000. So from that point, you can run all kinds of scenarios to say, well, what if we picked up so many of this 37,000? What's the likelihood that we'll pick up so many of the 37,000? If they were to pick up the 37,000 on the dissidents, however, then they would be over, you would think, the 7 that they need to have a controlling vote on the board of directors. And once again, the president, if their goal was to change management, could possibly be voted off and new management possibly taking place shortly.